Hello, everybody. I think we're ready to get started. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, welcome to everyone who is joining us here today at COP27 and the many more watching us from around the world. My name is Karina Hirsch. I'm the Advocacy and Projects Manager at the Margaret Pyke Trust, one of the co-organizers of today's event. And I'm delighted and deeply honored that I've been asked to moderate this session for you today. Today's event is entitled Removing Barriers to Family Planning in African Climate Policy Processes. And throughout this COP, there is a word that I have heard over and over again that indeed I think many of us have heard over and over with reference to women and girls, and that is the word barriers. Las barreras, les barrières, barriers in many languages, in many forums. We hear about barriers to education, to land, to water, to food, to technology. All of these barriers dictate and indeed curtail women's lives. Now, there's a set of barriers that we aren't talking about nearly enough in the context of climate change, and that's what we're here to talk about today, and those are the barriers to voluntary and rights-based family planning. There are 218 million women and girls in low and middle income countries who lack such access, who lack access to the information, the products, and the services to realize a fundamental right. Not only is this a fundamental right necessary to the empowerment and to the health and to the betterment of the lives of women and girls, it is also an important adaptation and resilience building strategy. We have a truly illustrious panel, which I'm delighted to have here for you today, working across sectors in African countries, really leading this discussion and integrating reproductive health, reproductive choice into climate adaptation and resilience building. But before we hear from them, I would like for us to turn to listen to the keynote address that has been kindly sent to us by Dr. Samukelizo Dube, the Executive Director of Family Planning 2030, the global partnership on family planning housed by the United Nations Foundation. Let's hear from Dr. Dube.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, from the International Conference on Family Planning in Pattaya City in Thailand, which is the world's largest convening of experts in sexual and reproductive health and rights. My name is Samukelizo Dube, and I'm the Executive Director for FP 2030. I would have loved to be with you in Sharm el-Sheikh at this important event that highlights the importance of removing barriers to family planning as part of climate adaptation and resilience building, as would many of my colleagues here in Thailand. I think the fact that the International Conference on Family Planning and COP27 were scheduled to take place almost at the same time highlights how much further we all have to go to bring sectors together and join our efforts to ensure girls and women are not forgotten when we discuss climate change. Each year, ladies and gentlemen, women and girls are displaced by natural disasters. They are displaced by war, conflict across the globe, as we have seen. And in 2020 alone, about 51 million, and they are uniquely a vulnerable population. The increasingly severe and frequent weather events and natural disasters, they are further exacerbating existing chronic vulnerabilities that disproportionately affect women and girls. And the already high rates of unplanned pregnancies, unsafe abortion, and maternal deaths in fragile contexts are magnified during times of crisis. According to research, up to 40% of women experiencing displacement across diverse settings want to avoid becoming pregnant. Yet, incidents of rape and other forms of gender-based violence increase during times of crisis, affecting women and girls more acutely. Even if a woman intends to avoid a pregnancy, often she may not have the means nor the ability to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a time where you know that health systems in conflict situations are broken and skills become scarce. We all know, therefore, that climate change is, for these women and girls, not some future challenge. It is a current reality, a current critical threat to their very being, their survival, and to thriving. The impact of natural disasters, climate change, conflict, and even infectious diseases, particularly what we have seen with COVID-19 globally, it is threatening the health and societal well-being. It also depends on how well countries, communities, families are prepared for, they respond to, and they recover from emergencies. So it is why at FP 2030, we are working to ensure family planning forms part of emergency preparedness and response to contribute to more resilient systems. And we are advocating for emergency preparedness and response, and including resilience for sexual and reproductive health to be included in country commitments and in climate change commitments. Now, to date, 25 governments, 20 of which are from Africa, have made their commitments to include emergency preparedness and response. It clearly shows that there is a growing engagement in this critical area. For us, it is our focus, and today you will hear from others focused on other connections between climate change and family planning. And now, as a global collective, we need to work together to break down silos, to reduce the silos that create synergies that foster partnerships between sexual and reproductive health actors and climate adaptation, resilience, and disaster risk management actors. We are very proud to already count on some of you who are in the room today. Margaret Pyke Trust, Blue Ventures, PHE Ethiopia Consortium, and even the International Crane Foundation, to name a few. And we encourage other climate change actors and disaster risk management actors to make FP 2030 commitment to jointly improve women and girls' access to high quality and rights-based family planning.
We're so grateful to have the contribution of Dr. Dubé and reminding us about the urgency of this issue and the need to work together to prepare and implement practical solutions. So on that note, I think we're going to start hearing about those practical solutions that are being implemented across the African continent. And I think we will hear first from Flavia Baikwazo, a senior climate change officer at the Ministry of Water and the Environment in the government of Uganda, and Mr. Raymond Rayuka, head of Youth Advocacy and Development Network Uganda, to tell us a bit more about what Uganda is already doing, how Uganda is leading the curve, not only on this issue, but Uganda has been recognized many times over at this COP, not least winning the Climate Mobility Champion Award for having aligned its NDC with its long-term strategy and approach to tackling climate change. So we look very much forward to hearing the dialogue between you two and learning from you. Raymond and Flavia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina, and good afternoon. Once again, I'm Raymond Ryoka, Director of YADNET Uganda. We are happy to be part of this, and we note that as Dr. Dubé has mentioned, the Director for FP 2030, you cannot separate the two. Therefore, it is imperative that we prioritize acceleration of family planning in the climate agenda. As Karina has mentioned, Uganda has been recognized several at this conference as a champion of scaling up climate action, especially in addressing the NDCs, submitting one of the greatest recognized updated NDC with the LTS, long-term strategy, which is remarkable, with other appreciations and benefits that have accrued. And with us, we have Flavia, who is from Ministry, and we recognize that one, that contribution. So having that government has done a lot in this agenda, what are the plans, especially going forward in the NDC, NDC submitted, recognized? What is government planning, ensuring that they implement the NDCs, because it's paramount that as we develop them, they are well implemented. So what is the ministry, especially, which is the lead in the NDC processes, doing to ensure that the NDCs are effectively implemented? Thank you. Over to you, Flavia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you, Raymond. And good afternoon to you all. I'm Biekwaso Flavia. I'm working with the Ministry of Water and Environment as a Senior Climate Change Officer. I'm standing in for the Commissioner Climate Change Department. Back to your question, for a sustainable, resilient health sector, the government of Uganda decided to develop country priority adaptation actions with their indicators, and some of these, to mention a few, we decided to integrate climate actions into the national health plans and strategies. And secondly, we've also done to improve the early warning, surveillance, and response systems for climate-sensitive hazards. Thirdly, we've tried to strengthen climate resilience of health infrastructure and the systems. And last but not least, we are also planning to implement integrated health-related climate interventions, considering policies in respect of water and sanitation, education, social protection, and reproductive health care. All these are included in Uganda's national adaptation plans of action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a question for Flavia. Thank you very much. We know cognizant that, and especially as you mentioned, Uganda has been recognized for the great work done, and we recognize as you mentioned, her president had been integrated in the NDCs. We need to look at how, as implementing the NDCs, what will be the role of non-state actors, especially out of your government. From your side, what do you think would be the role of the non-state actors and development partners to ensure that these NDCs are effectively implemented and also tracked to achieve their strategy as it's formed? Thank you.
Back to me. Thank you once again, Raymond. Government has put in place the enabling environment for CSOs to come and engage with it. For example, the National Climate Change Policy with its costed implementation strategy, it has put into consideration the health sector, and it's one of the most vulnerable and risk sectors, ranking high in the climate change policy. And it has also, government has also put in place the National Climate Change Act, which was recently released. So health issues are well anchored in that sector. So the private sector and the civil society organizations, they have the enabling environment to allow them to participate together with government. And right now we're also working on the regulations to enable us work together with other implementing partners.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for Flavia once again. Thank you very much. We know that as stakeholders, as government, you have a call for stakeholders that what do they need to prioritize for you to support the processes. So what could be those asks that you can put forward to civil society? And I know our panelists are going to respond or give contribution to it, but you think you can support the ministry to achieve the NDC and ETS agenda, implementing it further. Any questions or asks you could have? Thank you.
I was just wondering which areas a civil society organization would love to work with government in respect to in implementing its recently submitted updated nationally determined contribution. How do civil society organizations plan to work with government in that aspect?
Thank you. I speak on behalf of the CSOs on the forum, and definitely I request to give my view in relation to the role of civil society in ensuring that the government delivers the NDC's agenda. One is to appreciate the last 2-3 years, we have seen government meaningfully participating and ensuring CSOs participate fully. And I request the members to clap for government of Uganda, and especially civil society with us here, that is the first time that we have seen government opening up consultations with civil society. We have been part of the process from the start, as the commissioner mentioned yesterday. We have been part of the process of tracking, and in the revising the updating the NDCs, we are consulted fully. So we appreciate the government of Uganda for giving us space. Of course, as players in this field, we commit as civil society. One, identifying these areas we are passionate that we do, because as civil society, our role is ensuring that we go on the ground. I want to have the NDCs being felt on the ground. Want our communities appreciate what the NDCs are, because from our perspective, it looked at as a policy and a planning document for ministries and government. The local communities don't know much about NDCs. So as civil society, we commit to create awareness and sensitization of communities in ensuring that they appreciate the NDCs, and also localize them in their respective regions and the sphere. And I know our partners are agreeing to this, and in our strategy as the civil society, we shall call upon other stakeholders to join us to support the government to ensure that these NDCs are localized and also created awareness on. Secondly, we're interested in tracking the progress of the NDC implementation. Civil society, our role, of course, is about accountability and transparency and following up the agenda. We shall work with the ministry to ensure that we ensure these NDCs are well tracked, especially with the local governments, where now they will be the champions of ensuring that they develop this agenda. We know that from the MDG 2015 to transit into SDGs in 2016, there are many challenges that happen, especially community structures. So our role is to strengthen the community structures, that reporting and data is well managed, especially tracking NDCs. And specifically for us in the health sector, we're interested to work with the ministry to have the SRH family planning agenda reflected, but also data well captured. The most important area that we think and we know that will going to happen is about partnerships and collaboration. So as civil society, we shall advance and promote partnerships and collaboration with non-state actors, with the private sector, with the public sector, to ensure that NDCs are reflected, are localized, but most importantly, they are well implemented as an agency. Last but not least, as said, we need resources. Resources, I mean both financial and human, to ensure that the NDCs are well felt on the ground. So as a society, we shall do our best to ensure that these resources are availed, and in whichever way support the government, and we thank the government of Uganda for giving us the environment as you mentioned. We shall support this agenda to ensure that these are well functioned. We shall lobby the decision makers as civil society, because our role is about advocacy and influencing. We know that as the ministries, you need the local members of parliament and the policy makers to allocate adequate resources. We shall engage the Minister of Finance of Uganda and AO by retros to allocate adequate resources to Ministry of Water and the other line ministries to effectively implement the NDCs, because the ministries need resources, financing, adequate financing, to ensure that these NDCs are well implemented. Otherwise, thank you very much. We look forward to great discussion, and we commit ourselves to support this agenda. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Flavia, and thank you, Raymond. Thank you for walking us through a bit of the timeline of how far Uganda has come. And I think you raised a very good point. Now, you have reproductive health in the NDCs, and it's in your priority adaptation targets, and now the work going forward is about making sure it's reflected in the implementation. And I think really happy that through discussions here at COP that you've facilitated, Raymond, we've started discussions on a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Gender in Uganda, but together it will be a kind of tripartite memorandum of understanding as well with the Ministry of the Environment. So that's work that we look forward to taking together with you. Before we move to our second country dialogue, I think it will help shape our discussion here today to hear from Awimbabazi Sarah, the Margaret Pyke Trust's Uganda country lead, and Karen Morrison, head of Africa Conservation at the Endangered Wildlife Trust.
Hello, warm greetings from Uganda to everyone at COP27. There will be many people at the climate change conference speaking about the need for change in policy and the need for action. They are right. I am here to share with you what I have learned from 6 months of research, which I undertook with my colleagues from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, Rugarama Hospital, and International Crane Foundation in the district of Ruchiga, which also happens to be my home. The aim of our ethnographic research was to better understand the challenges that we are facing in Ruchiga and how communities see the connections between them. We learned that people in Ruchiga understand fully that their health, climate change, and the health of their local environment are connected. During the research, they told us that inadequate health services, including family planning services, means many families are having more children than they would have ideally. They told us about rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and changing farming practices, leading to land degradation, drought, flooding, and landslides. This affects food security, nutrition, and health. It is made worse when people are unable to plan the size of their family. Building climate-resilient communities means that we need to provide health services and provide livelihood support, as well as work to ensure health ecosystems provide the services we need to prevent the flooding. When the challenges are connected, the solutions also need to be connected. It is important at COP27 the policy makers listen to the people who are most affected. When we talk about barriers to family planning, it means things like women in Ruchiga are finding it hard to find trained health workers to provide them with the family planning methods they want, and women not having enough money to afford the long journeys to access the healthcare services. Removing these barriers is climate action. There are positive developments in climate policy, and we will hear some more today. However, we must remember that our communities understand the connections between barriers to family planning, food security, climate change, nutrition, and gender-based violence because they have experienced these challenges as connected. This reality needs to translate into action by those who are not, like our communities most affected. Thank you.
Good afternoon from Mpumalanga here in South Africa. Working in conservation in rural areas across Africa means that we see firsthand the important links between human and environmental health every day. Reproductive health and rights should be seen as fundamental to the work of most conservation organizations working in Africa. You have just heard from my colleague at the Margaret Pyke Trust about how communities understand the connections between climate change, livelihoods, and health, including reproductive health, and are demanding action. There are a growing number of conservation organizations in Africa that are hearing these calls and partnering with the health sector in relation to developing programs. There are also a growing number of African conservation organizations seeking changes to climate and biodiversity policies to recognize reproductive health and rights. I am proud to sit on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Biodiversity and Family Planning Task Force, the launch of which is a recent positive development. It is important, though, that we focus on why conservation organizations like the International Crane Foundation, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, and others are working to develop programs where the health sector and conservation sector integrate approaches. These approaches include things such as climate-smart agricultural practices, habitat restoration, and reproductive health service provision. There are two main answers to this question. Firstly, it is the right thing to do. It is a fundamental human right to be able to determine if, when, and with whom to have children. Secondly, it works. Women are often the backbone of agricultural landscapes, and improving farming practices improves the revenues and livelihoods of households in general. Already we are seeing the results in the communities. Overall greater impact, accelerating progress on gender, health, livelihoods, conservation, and climate goals. Working across the health and conservation sectors enables us to reach more people than we would through a traditional single-sector conservation program. We can truly begin to tackle deeply rooted challenges, such as the lack of livelihoods, biodiversity loss, climate change, and gender equality and the unmet need for family planning. As a conservation organization, we are extremely proud to improve human and environmental health in the last mile communities where we work, thanks to the partnerships with health actors that has allowed us to integrate reproductive health with our climate and conservation work.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Karen. It was great to hear from them on how, when you integrate sexual and reproductive health and rights and climate, how that plays out on the ground, and what Karen just said for improved human and environmental health impacts, thanks to that integrated approach. So moving now from Uganda and South Africa to another African country, I'd like us to turn to Eswatini, who are also leading the way in integrating health and gender into climate policy. We'll now hear another dialogue from Duduzile Hlengetwa Masina, the NDC focal point from the government of Eswatini, and Deepa Pulanikatil, the NDC coordinator with the Ministry of Tourism and Environmental Affairs, contract for NDP. Duduzile and Deepa, the floor is yours. We look forward to your dialogue.
Thank you, Karina. I think before I start, I just wanted to share that whenever we talk about family planning in our climate change professionals mix, the question is, what does family planning have to do with climate change? So I like to share stories and experiences from Malawi, where I learned how family planning and climate change are interconnected. So I used to work in Malawi before coming to Eswatini, and we were doing a climate change adaptation project where we were working with farmers to help them with climate smart agriculture, working with women's group on solar dryers to dry fish, improving livelihoods through various income generation activities. And often we used to visit the communities in the villages, and when we go, we find that the participation of women was not as good as we expected. So we asked them, how can we improve the participation of women in these climate change adaptation project? And they said that, you're doing a great job. You're bringing us all these technologies, these inputs. You're trying to help us improve our livelihood. But we don't have access to family planning. So we have a lot of unplanned pregnancies, and we have several children with very short gap between the births, and therefore we're busy and we're not able to attend your meetings or participate in your project. And they demanded that can your project help us to access family planning? And our project was a completely environment focused project. But luckily, when we approached our funder and explained this, they were interested to support. And then also through partnerships with Family Planning Association of Malawi and other partners, we were able to address the needs of the women. And that got me thinking that really if women need to effectively participate in climate change adaptation, they must have control over their bodies. They must be able to have children and plan their life. And that contributes to good health for them, and that is very critical to building resilience and adaptive capacity. And there was also one story where we did an exchange visit between one village and another. The other village had a traditional leader who was very supportive of family planning. So that village was receiving a lot of support, and all the women had access to family planning, while the village that visited did not have. And when the women came back after the exchange visit, they went to their chief and demanded that they want access to family planning. And the chief had to walk 12 kilometers to the nearest family planning clinic to request for a mobile service to come to their village to address the needs of these women. So such stories really helped me understand these interlinkages, because communities live integrated lives. We can't do development in silos or think that climate change has nothing to do with family planning. And that helped us to break the silos of our project and address the needs. So unplanned pregnancies are a hindrance for women to adapt to climate change. An unmet need for family planning in Malawi, at that time it was 27%. It has improved much, it's almost 15% now. And in Eswatini, also currently unmet need for family planning is 15%. This means 15% of women want to access family planning, but are prevented from or do not have access to family planning. And in our case, in Eswatini, the highest unmet need is among the poor, and among women aged 15 to 49 and adolescents, the unmet need is as high as 28.6%. And how does this impact them? According to an education survey conducted by the Ministry of Education in Eswatini, about 300 girls drop out of school annually due to pregnancy. And so that amounts to a total of 1,288 girls missing out on education to pregnancy in the 4-year period that the study was done. And for a country which only has a population of 1.2 million, this is significant. We cannot ignore this. Having given that background, I have the honor to be here with my focal point, who is also the director of Department of Meteorology, Dudu Nhlengetu. So I want to ask our NDC focal point to just share with the audience here about the NDCs, NDC being the main climate policy document for the country. How did you go about revising the NDC? It was a very inclusive project. How was it? Please share some insights on that.
Thank you very much, Deepa, and very good afternoon to all our participants and fellow panelists and the table. That's what started on thinking about reviewing our NDC. The key thing was noting that the very name itself, it says nationally determined. Now the question is, who is the nation? So who should determine this commitment? So when you talk about the nation, you cannot afford to pick and choose who the nation will be. Now, going to the SDGs, we found that there is the issue of leaving no one behind. And for us, it really meant that as we are nationally determining our contribution to the climate change, we should not leave anyone behind. Hence, we adopted the whole of government, whole of society approach. It was a very difficult time to do this as we were in a COVID era where we had a lot of restrictions coming up every now and then, but still the assistance from partners and really being determined to leave no one behind. We had about 44 workshop days, and in addition to that, we also had virtual meetings. And we did this working together in leading. It was not just the Environment Ministry that is responsible for climate change, but we also had the Ministry of Economic Planning leading with us. And during this workshop sessions, we met with different stakeholders. We had gender activists, we had the youth, and as a result of that, we ended up with an organization, with the youth organizing itself to participate in climate change, particularly like raising awareness on climate change and also being part of the climate action group. We also consulted traditional leaders and the various sectoral experts, which we also included the DRR family, disability groups, and so on. We would have loved to do more, but we had a limit both in time and because of the COVID. But this whole process took us a whole year. We could have done it faster, but we had to take all this time to make sure that we are moving together with everyone, including our children and women, because obviously we need them also in this process. Just listening to what you are saying, Deepa, I am thinking we cannot ignore the issue of children falling pregnant while they're at school. We need STEM. We need our children to be educated. We need them to have that science, that understanding that will help them come up with more solutions for climate action. So we really, really need to take this issue seriously and get out of this rut of our girl child being deprived the opportunity to go to school because of pregnancies.
Thank you, Dudu. Yes, definitely. And also the NDC had contributions related to health and gender, as you mentioned. So really discussing those issues, vulnerabilities, how these kind of vulnerabilities for the girl child increases and how it can be addressed through the NDC is very, very important. And through our NDC, we also try to look at the vulnerable groups, as you mentioned, youth and women and children, and also climate change adaptation efforts across all sectors of the economy. And health was a new sector that came in. It was not in our INDC. And we built gender mainstreaming into the climate actions throughout the NDC. And also have an element of gender equality in the NDC, which access to sexual reproductive health care and family planning is essential for gender equality. So moving on to the next question, specifically on gender, how did you address gender equality in the NDC?
As we developed the NDC, we worked with the gender unit, which is within the Deputy Prime Minister's office, and that ministry also hosts the Children's Office, coincidentally. And in working with them, we identified that they are without a gender policy, so we worked together to formulate that gender policy. And as we were doing that, we were also identifying what sort of things that we also need to look into to ensure that when we do our MRV, we can be able to identify that gender is being identified. And we are very grateful to the partners that we worked with in this regard. And we also had a video that we worked on that is raising awareness on gender and climate change, which is a tool that it was not a once-off just to use during the NDC formulation, but it's something that is still there for us to use going forward. We believe that as we implement the NDC, as it's in our NDC, the gender will continue to be mainstreamed. And as I indicated that we already have the youth formulating group, we also intend to continue working with the women to make sure they are not left behind and we're able to address their issues also as we're addressing climate change. Maybe just to talk about the health aspect also, as we have already said, we also included the health into our NDC as a new sector that we didn't have prior. This is very important. Health is a very critical player. It is affected by climate change, just the health sector itself. And when we have disasters, we are seeing increasing natural disasters, floods. You find that the health infrastructure is affected, and it makes things a little bit more complicated. And this can also easily just affect the reproductive health services production, including family planning, because if I can no longer drive across the bridge. Eswatini has a lot of mountains and rivers that sometimes get flooded. If I can no longer go across at a time where I need to go and attend to my sexual reproductive health, then it complicates my life. So we really want to ensure that the health sector, its infrastructure and the understanding of how health is affected will be taken into consideration as we continue with our NDC, and we're currently developing the implementation plan, and will then be moving to the investment plan. And we trust and believe that we will have programs and projects that will really help the health sector, including reproductive health. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, for highlighting how the health and gender issues are integrated into the NDC. And gender, although it is a cross-cutting issue, it is also part of several adaptation sectors. But it's also a standalone in our NDC, and that we did that deliberately because having it standalone will help us to put a budget to it. And give it the attention, and also for monitoring, reporting, and verification on that. So I hope the experiences from Eswatini have given us clearly that there are gendered differences to climate change, and that access to family planning and addressing gender inequality, empowering women will improve adaptive capacity and build resilience. It's very important to have all of this in climate change policy documents, and NDC is one of the key policy document. And finally, as we develop projects, we are now developing the NDC implementation plan, as Director mentioned, and that will include developing projects. So as we develop projects, we need to keep this in mind, take this multi-sectoral approach, integrated approach, and not a siloed approach. So this is our chance to integrate sexual reproductive health, family planning, and health and other health issues into this addressing the complex challenge of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Druzila. Thank you so much, Deepa, for telling us more about the experience of Eswatini and how health and gender, it was decided, would be standalone components to really have a strong basis for those in the plans going forward, as you talked about now, the plans for implementation. So those create a very strong basis for then having actually reproductive health be part of that implementation and be seen across the sectors. So thank you very much for that. Now, last but certainly not least, I would like to turn to Abebe Shibru, the Ethiopia Country Director of MSI Reproductive Choices. And he is going to, among other things, tell us about a joint guidance document that has just been launched entitled Climate Change Engagement, a Guide for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Organizations, that MSI prepared in conjunction with YADNET, with PHE Ethiopia Consortium, and with the Margaret Pyke Trust. Now, we want to thank Abebe especially because he actually flew in from the International Conference on Family Planning only late last night. being there to advocate for the importance of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and then being here at the conference on climate change, also advocating for the importance of sexual and reproductive health and rights as it relates to climate policy. So we're really grateful that he made it all this way to be able to speak with us today. Thank you very much, Abebe. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, virtual participants as well, depends on where you are. I'm Abebe Shiburu, I'm a country director for Reproductive Choice of Ethiopia, and I'm a member of Family Planning 2030. So I think the issue of climate change and sexual reproductive is very critical, particularly in the world that we are in, a very changing environment, fast-pacing developments, lot of challenges, lot of opportunities. All those things attract the importance of integrating reproductive health services and climate change. MSI Reproductive Choices is an international organization dedicated to save the lives of women and girls through the provision of high-quality standard reproductive health family planning in different parts of the world. So today, I'm here in front of you to talk about why really climate change matters when we are addressing reproductive health services. It is clear and it is visible that the interlinkage between climate change, environment, natural resource, biodiversity crisis are visible. It's a day-to-day phenomena that we are dealing with. MSI Reproductive Choice, collaboration with organization fostering partnership to advance the integration of reproductive health services with climate change initiatives. As you all know that MSI Reproductive Choice is recognizing family planning and reproductive health is a life-saving tool. And beyond that, it is an accelerator for the socio-economic development of a given nation. It is a critical aspect of development for the world. It's one of the most important components of economic growth in Africa context in particular. However, taking family planning and reproductive health by itself means nothing. Despite that, our world is being challenged by the climate change. Because of the climate change, who is paying the first price? Women, children, girls. So because of that, integrating family planning, reproductive health with climate change is not questionable. It's very important. It's very critical for us in order to create the better future for women, children, and girls. So MSI contributes its rich experience on family planning and reproductive health because of its global commitments, local initiatives in improving women's life through the provision of comprehensive family planning services. As we are talking about the climate change, MSI has studied to what extent the climate change impacted or affecting the lives of women in the world. So 26 countries was chosen where climate change has impacted or affected them very well. In these countries, we found out more than 11.5 million women, they have denied of their right for family planning and reproductive health because of climate change. Based on this, unless and otherwise, this phenomenon, this trend is reversed. A decade ahead of us, we are expecting more than 14 million women again that will face right deprivation. They may not have a chance to protect their body. They may not have a chance to continue with their education. They may not have the chance to play the role for the socio-economic development of our world. So because of that, the 14 million people or women are in danger unless and otherwise something has to be done. These 14 million disaster or 13 million problems, 13 million women are facing problems. This will lead an additional of 6.2 million unintended pregnancy. That means 6.2 million, they want to continue in education. They want to continue to play their role in socio-economic development because of the problem impacted by climate change. They will face unintended pregnancy. That means they have to discontinue their education. That means, they have to stop doing the economic development in their given nations. Of these 4 million, again, 2.1 million people will end it with unsafe abortion. How this is criminal, how this is critical. Because of climate change, 2.1 million women undergo with unsafe abortion. This is a moral issue. This requires a critical urgency. This requires sense of urgency. And again, because of that, unless all those things are reversed, we are expected 5,400 women will pass their life. They will die. So this is how climate change affects women. The importance of sexual reproductive health integration with family planning is critical and crucial. We are talking about sustainable development goal. Family planning is an accelerator. Climate change is also a critical part. So if you're integrating family planning with sexual reproductive health, definitely the sustainable development goal will be real for us. Otherwise, it's not going to be materialized. That's why I'm here today to advocate the importance of sexual reproductive health and family planning integration with with climate change. It is obvious most of the climate change policymakers, funders, advocates, they are not integrating family planning in their climate change strategy. So we are here today to advocate the importance of family planning, and then we're requesting funders, advocates, designers, policymakers, don't undermine the importance of family planning while you are addressing climate change. So as part of this commitment, MSI, along with other organizations, as has been mentioned by the moderator, we have adopted a guideline. I'm very much pleased to share to you today. We have developed a guideline that would enable civic society organizations dealing with sexual reproductive health, organizations working on climate change, how to integrate family planning, sexual reproductive health, along with climate change. So this is a step-by-step guide, how to implement, how to advocate, how to advance their voice for the betterment of our future. So this guidance is very critical, very simple, very straightforward guideline. So if you're able to use this guideline, definitely you will be one step ahead of us in terms of addressing family planning, sexual reproductive health with climate change initiatives. This is what I would like to say today. And this is very critical time for us. It's very critical time for a woman to bring reproductive. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Abebe. That was for the real thing we need to do with the guide now is we need to ensure that it's really an open tool. I think something important to mention in addition about the guide is that this type of guidance, this type of a tool was requested by many MSI country offices where the communities that MSI serves in those countries are dealing with the effects of climate change every single day. So now it's up to us to get it out there and make sure that it is used, because you're right, climate change policymakers yet a broad base of understanding and of support of how the issues that we have discussed here today and the very intricate and precise ways they are linked, that isn't clear yet to the of policymakers, and it's guides such as this and it's people such as you who do make those links very clear. And so I think we need to continue what we are doing and make sure that message continues to be heard and to be made louder. And I think if we think back towards from other COPs to today, this issue is, while it's not, I wouldn't say it is mainstream, but it is. We are hearing these issues being spoken about in more than one event, in more than one particular forum, and seeing it come up in NDCs. So I think there's much more to be done, but there's a lot to celebrate. So I'm glad you all came today to share and to celebrate what has been done. I want to thank the panelists who were with us here today and those who contributed via video. So as you've heard today, access to rights-based voluntary family planning has been recognized as an adaptation and as a resilience-building strategy to further gender, health, and climate goals. That's why we say it is such a powerful development strategy. It doesn't just tick one SDG box, but it ticks many, and it accelerates many. We've heard today how when governments, civil society, and other stakeholders across African countries work together, they bridge the gaps between sectors, and they are able to operationalize, and we've seen this operationalizing and integrating this issue into their national climate policies. Ladies and gentlemen, these are all countries whose people are living with the effects of climate change every day. It's not that climate change will affect them in some undefined moment in the future, and it makes me emotional because it is an emotional issue. A baby cited how many women, they are going to die. Their children are going to be malnourished and might also die if we don't take this kind of action. These are countries where we see the human face of climate change. And as Abebe said, and as I heard the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification say, the face of climate change is a woman's face. So let's do what we need to do to make the women and girls in those communities more resilient to climate change. We know what that is. We must integrate reproductive health, reproductive choice into climate policies, and we know how to do that. We have the tools, we have the processes, and we have very concrete examples of how this has been done and the benefits that this will have on the ground. And we've heard today that it's the right thing to do, but we've also heard today that it's the smart thing to do. So as a very wise colleague, who unfortunately is no longer with us, said, it is what science is proving and it is what justice is demanding, so let's do it. Thank you very much to those who joined online today. Thank you very much to those in the audience, and thank you very much to a truly wonderful panel. Thank you very much.